Episode 56 is titled The Basement, because it is in fact about the basements. No amount of overanalyzing can add anything there. After 55 episodes and nearly 3 full seasons, it is time to finally learn what this basement is all about. I lied. In a whole lot of horror settings, and really any setting if you happen to be young, basements often evoke a sense of fear and some hidden horrors lurking in the darkness. In this case, we always knew that there was some big secret here. And while said secret may not really be spooky to us as the audience, it would be horrifying beyond belief to Eren. The outside world that he dreamed so much about, the lands of ice, the fields of sand, the salty oceans, all are already tainted by the cruelty of humanity. What they once thought to be the end of their suffering quickly becomes merely the beginning. So yes, a very simple title, but one that I think even outside of Attack on Titan definitely evokes a sense of a forgotten secret and something darker. Moving into the episode itself, we open with a couple of Bertolt flashbacks from episode 52. On one hand, this is just where Armin's memories end, and so these flashbacks are deliberately trying to put us in the shoes of Armin. Just like him, the last thing we see before he wakes up is Bertolt's transformation. But to titularly overanalyze, I think there's a bigger conversation to be had around all the memory shenanigans surrounding Titan inheritance. Like we've seen with Eren, Fakemir, and now Armin, their memories of actually eating the Titan Shifter are usually completely blank. Even as a pure Titan, their memories are usually fine, it's just that exact moment that goes completely blank. But then you take Eren. He only recovered his memories when he came in contact with royal blood, and let's actually stop right there. Because Eren didn't just recover those memories, he saw both perspectives. Admittedly, with Eren, things are a bit more complicated since, he has the Founding Titan and the Attack Titan, both of which do all kinds of memory shenanigans. But my interpretation of why all of this memory disruption happens is this. Number 1, all of the Titan powers, not just the Founder or the Attack Titan, but all of them transcend time. That is why Freckles Ymir could be a pure Titan, but when she returned to her human form, she had, no signs of aging. Which leads us on to numero 2. The paths transcend time and space, and more importantly, connect every single Eldian and their memories. And that is also why the Founding Titan can ping everyone in Discord. Which finally leads us on to numero 3. I think the reason why Armin's memories stop at the very moment Bertolt transforms is because in that instant, he becomes the Colossal Titan. I think in that moment, their memories are essentially just overriding each other. Armin should inherit Bertolt's memories, but when he wakes up, he doesn't have Bertolt's memories because he was still alive, and then there's this whole blank period where both of them were alive and both of them were fighting, so that period is just blank. Yes, I know this is baseless and meaningless speculation about something that doesn't affect the story literally at all, but it's fun to think about, okay? As Armin wakes up, we get this incredible sequence of him coming face to face with the half-skeleton version of Bertolt's Colossal. Outside of being just the coolest thing ever, it also brings up a number of really interesting questions. First off, and this really isn't a question, it highlights the trend of each and every one of the Marley squad being deeply scarred. Upon Annie's defeat, she just sat there, slumped up against the tree, and cried. Once Ryanair ate a handful of Thunder Spears, he screamed out for his life, he begged not to die. In the previous episode, we got that spine-chilling scene of Bertolt screaming out first to Eren, and only then to Annie and Reiner. Because, again, like he himself said, he considered all of them friends. It wasn't just the fact that, he was about to be munched on. There was also this hurt of, wait, why are my friends not helping me? Even during the Eren chase in Season 2, Bathwater 2 cried out for someone, anyone, to help them. And so here, we just see a tear swelling up in the Colossal's eye. I think it's fair to say that by this point, the power of the Titans was entirely demystified, and we knew that this was a war. But even so, seeing the Colossal of all Titans, the one that started this entire story, just crying, certainly sends the message that we are now in a whole different stage of the story. But numero 2, barbecue mumbling, it hurts. We'd see Sasha mumbling the same thing, which naturally prompts Armin to think that everything he just saw was just a nightmare. But the thing is, we know for an absolute fact that it is not just nightmares, because, again, Ymir. In Season 2, we literally saw her within the paths. So I think an alternate interpretation of this scene is emphasizing that the pain both sides feel is exactly the same. This entire story is about a cycle of hatred where both sides suffer. But number 3, these visions and bizarre nightmares immediately spark the question of how much of Armin is no longer Armin. To be clear, there is no hard proof that Bertolt's memories are influencing Armin in any tangible way, so all of this is purely speculation. But even so, what it does do is create paranoia. And so for me at least, it does make me ask whether there is some subtle influence that he might not even realize. So much of the Attack on Titan story is about these inherited wars and beliefs about free will and lack thereof. So even if there is no explicit indication that Bertolt's memories are pushing Armin in any given direction, I absolutely think that things like his feelings for Annie, his frame of mind in Liberio, and many other moments do raise the question of, is this really just Armin? Is the same thing we see with Eren. Is Eren like Grisha, or is Grisha Eren, and are both of them just Ymir? And how much of Ymir is Eren, and how much of Eren is Ymir? And on the complete flip side, how much of Reiner, for example, is just Marleyan beliefs that have been drilled into him? Most of the story is about blind acceptance of some inherited conflicts. But one thing I would have loved here so much is if they spliced in that Bertolt scene from the episode prior, only like from his point of view. I think that would have been like the perfect, but quite messed up addition to Armin's fears. Like, imagine Armin seeing himself reach out to Eren, only for then to scream out for Annie and Reiner. I think that moment for him would have been like the perfect mixture of fear and confusion, because this is not his body. What is he seeing? That aside though, this episode is just trying to convey that sense of being completely lost in every sense of the word. When we open the episode, we don't know whether this is a vision, whether it's a whole flashback, where Armin even is, and so on. Just like him, we simply stare down the Colossal, just trying to catch up on where we even left off. As we fade back to present day, Armin notices Sasha mumbling, which finally jolts him out of that initial shock. But Eren just immediately running to hug him has to be like one of the most wholesome scenes in the entire series. It's not often that we see this kind of vulnerability from Eren. With characters like Hannes, there was so much desperation and sadness, but there was an equal, if not greater amount of just pure hatred. Here, on the other hand, is just the purest form of almost gratitude that he is alive. And with the benefit of hindsight, this scene just hits so much harder because, in a way, this is Eren's capture in Season 2 all over again. There too, the story took a pivotal turn, after which their little trio would never be the same. We learned that Eren is the Founding Titan, which then set off a whole cascade of events that eventually led to his mind being completely scrambled in the Crystal Catacombs. And so I think this too marks this final moment of respite, because after this, Eren would slowly but surely begin to push everyone away. Very quickly we go from Eren just breaking down in tears and holding onto Armin to beating him down and belittling everything they've done. That is of course turned on its head yet again in the series finale, but now I'm pulling a future Eren, let's go back. A cool little direction thing we see here is Eren telling Armin what happened. But just like the opening of this episode skips to Armin just waking up, we again fade to Armin's horrified eyes as only this chilling wind fills the scene. And then that warped shot of Levi standing in a completely unnatural angle just asking, "You follow all that?" Again, perfectly illustrates just how lost Armin feels. I mean, look at him, he's literally just poking up from the corner, almost as if he was trying to cosplay the little T-Man. Wait a minute. A small detail here that I find ever so slightly sus is them saying that only 9 people survived. Now, the obvious and clearly intended interpretation is just that the losses were insurmountable. This mission makes the absolute bloodbath that was the Annie mission seem like a warm-up. However, 9 people surviving and the 9 Titans definitely seems a little bit interesting. And then in the long run you have Flock, which is of course also one of the survivors here, and his mission is to make sure that only the 9 Titans survive on parity. Okay, I'll stop. It doesn't make any sense. I'll stop. Armin, being the very tactical big brain that he is, just tries going through the story step by step, only to just start throwing up. And the greatest thing here is that you don't even know which part of the story is what makes him disturbed. Is it the countless deaths? Is it the fact that, oh, you know, he literally ate Bertolt? Or maybe it's, you know, that little fact that Erwin's life was sacrificed for him. Imagine being a little bullhead here and trying to take in all of that in the space of like 5 minutes. If anything, he's taking it very well. But he then just mumbles, "Why me?" Saying that regardless of what perspective you have, the injection should have gone to Erwin. We talked all about the rationale of choosing Armin over Erwin, or rather not choosing Erwin last time, so I won't be dealing with any of that here. Rather, I want to focus a bit more on Armin's point of view. Put simply, he is incredibly insecure about his abilities in just about any field. Even when Erwin explicitly gave him command, he still couldn't really give commands because he thought his judgment would be questioned. And the thing is, Armin is absolutely right. Erwin is a better commander. But at the same time, in a very roundabout way, Armin realizing that Erwin is so much more experienced than him is what makes Armin a good strategist. Erwin too surrounded himself with experts in their own fields. That is what an experienced leader does. They delegate tasks that best fit each person's skill sets. Armin realizing that he is not a commander is not a weakness, it's strength, one he simply doesn't realize. And so, he now turns to Levi personally, again asking him, why did he choose him? Levi, of course, gets a bit salty, kicking Eren and saying that he told him to explain everything. And here, you must remember that this is a written story. This is not just a funny, goofy thing of Eren didn't want to explain the whole story. I think this is very deliberately Isayama wanting Levi to be the one to vocalize his thoughts on the matter. This isn't the cold and distant Levi we see after a brutal defeat. The overall feelings are so much different because, to me, it feels like we are being purposely shown that Levi is at peace. He is obviously hurting, I mean, of course he is. But the way he carries himself is, well, at peace. I do think that there are a few, intangible and purely production things at play here, because I'm pretty sure that at least a part of this episode was done by, a different team or something. Levi's facial structures in some of these scenes does look a little bit different than they usually do, but my point still stands. He's not super angry, he's not super sad. If anything, he just goofs around about how Eren and Mikasa attempted a mutiny. But even so, he again reaffirms that, in the end, it was him who made the choice. Just like Hanji in the previous episode, regardless of what Jean says, or what Eren and Mikasa, slices, he is the one who made the choice, and he is the one who will bear that weight. That is leadership, that is responsibility, and that is maturity. His decisions, regardless of the circumstances, are his own. And, in a way, you can also read this as contrasting all of those arguments of free will. Levi is an Ackerman, and therefore not bound by all the timey-wimey Titan shenanigans. And I don't mean that, in an absolute sense. I'm talking about, purely in terms of themes, they can resist the power of the Titans, therefore they can, resist these inherited conflicts and stuff, but that is also kinda not even true because Kenny exists, but you get what I mean. All this is just about themes. Levi explains that, for personal reasons, he chose this to be Erwin's place of death. And as he says this, we see Erwin's corpse covered by the wings of freedom. Sunlight now shining through the window once more. It is no longer a setting sun. It is now a brand new day. And notice the flower. Full transparency, I had a whole paragraph talking about different kinds of flowers, but 3 minutes after talking about it, I realized that it's not relevant. In this case, I think they are just there to symbolize Erwin's peaceful passing. In the end, it wasn't some battlefield that tore him to shreds. No. His death was honorable, they won, it was all worth it, and so he lies there, still donning the wings of freedom. We'll return to this point with Shiganshina, so keep that in mind. As for who left it there, I think it could be just about anyone. You could take it to be the typical bro moment of Levi picking a single flower as this somber gesture to a fallen friend. You could take it to be Armin, who has already had very explicit symbolism with noticing flowers and beauty among destruction. You could take it to be Hanji, who will now carry their flag. Or you could also take it to be basically all of them because, again, of what we'd see in Shiganshina. I think that it is just there to symbolize that no matter how brutal this mission was, in the end, his death was peaceful. But then, like many people in the Attack on Titan fanbase, Armin too says that it just doesn't make any sense. Letting Erwin die is insane. And Hanji too says, I also thought Erwin should be saved, but then adding that, what's done is done. Erwin gave the syringe to Levi, Levi chose him. That is it. Personally, I think that is why Levi's reaction to Erwin's death is so much more subdued than like Isabel or Petra or Kenny. He is at peace with his decision, even if he never got to properly say goodbye. Everyone talks about how Erwin should have been saved because he's the better commander and he's the better leader, yada yada. But for Levi, it wasn't a question of skill to begin with. Naturally, Armin is just horrified, with him now somehow having to bear the weight of a Titan and Erwin's legacy. But Levi immediately steps in saying, of course he could never replace Erwin, but then saying that he does have a
very particular set of skills.
This is again that split in Erwin and Armin. They are both big brain, sure, but they are not the same, nor should they be. First off, it's again that ever-present matter of inheritance that we see throughout the story. Armin inheriting Bertolt's Titan shouldn't mean that he is in some way Bertolt, and him inheriting Erwin's legacy shouldn't mean that he is now an Erwin replacement. Putting that kind of responsibility and expectation for the quote-unquote next generation, if you will, is just cruel, and I mean we see the outcome of that throughout this entire story. All it does is cause disappointment, a lot of pain, and a continuation of a very, very bad cycle. Number 2, Armin is not a commander, but Erwin isn't the person who gave Eren a purpose and a dream. There are many other things to talk about, like strategy versus leadership and pragmatism versus vision, but for the story we are following, it's that dream of the sea that is the single most important thing. If you want to get like very philosophical with this, many times before we've heard Eren and his Titan referred to as humanity's only hope, the embodiment of their rage. And in the middle of that, the thing that keeps pushing Eren on is Armin's dream. Erwin, on the other hand, is the dude just fighting to make that happen. He takes care of that sort of practical side of these dreams. But the thing is, despite how goofy it sounds, sometimes in the darkest of nights, you don't need a torch to see. All you need is just knowing that the sun will rise again. That is Armin in Eren's story. He is the person who doesn't give Eren a solution, he doesn't give some practical plan. He gives Eren a true purpose beyond just destroying everything. And so Levi then says he doesn't have any regrets, that he shouldn't give Eren or Mikasa any reason to regret it, and above all, to not regret it himself. And that right there is how you know you have Levi's respect. Levi knows full well that Armin's biggest weakness, in terms of being this quote-unquote Erwin replacement, is his insecurity, and so by sharing his own life motto with him, I think is just a much-needed pep talk and just reaffirming that he is not indebted to anyone. Levi saved Armin unconditionally. Whatever happens, he does not regret that decision.
Shut the hell up.
Okay, I'm sorry, I know this episode is about the basement and we're like 15 minutes in and I'm still yapping, I promise I'll stop. Memes aside, again, note the tone of this episode. Despite the heartbreak that was the previous one, it is not doom and gloom. A new day is on the horizon, and the answers are just around the corner. And another neat detail here is Hanji saying that, as the successor of Erwin's title, I'm facing a lot of pressure too. Just like Armin, Hanji alone is not Erwin. Even put together, you could argue that they couldn't match Erwin and his insane hype man charisma. But what they absolutely are is a force to be reckoned with. The attack on Liberio was mostly cooked up by Hanji and Armin. They got away with like a handful of deaths while inflicting insurmountable damage on Marley. Sure, they had like inside agents and everything, but still, that plan, it was insane. Oh yeah, and then Hanji says something about like, going on over to the basement, which yeah right, that's the whole point of the story so far. And that is something I absolutely love here, because it feels so real. There isn't some super hype moment of, yes, let's go, we've made it to the basement. No, they've survived this harrowing mission. Going to the basement is an extremely bittersweet victory. It's like the typical thing of, we won, but at what cost? There is very little to really be celebrated here. But right, there is one extremely serious thing we need to talk about in this flashback, and that is, what is wrong with Carla's hair? Okay, straight up, this is impossible. Going from like Eren hair to Carla's hair in terms of length, while Eren is basically the same age, yeah, that's not possible. It is like bare minimum 3 years of growth. We don't see any kind of ponytail or anything like that. It's just magically short and magically long. We know she didn't cut it because she died with long hair, and Eren in this situation is basically the same age, and she suddenly has short hair. Not legit. I'm not even going to yap on about this. Clearly what the series is saying is just that this is future day Eren coming back in time dressed up as his mom to make sure that the present day Eren gets back to the future day Eren so that he can come back and dress up as his mom. What? What do you mean it's an animation error? Oh, you just want to sound smart. Oh my god, I hate these people. Animation error. How do you make an error in animation? You have to draw it and then like color it and then you have to like compose it. Like there's, what do you mean an animation error? Oh my god. Okay, that's enough. We've gone through like 6 layers of goofs, but yeah, this is very cursed. But no, I don't think it's supposed to be like any kind of you look like your mom, then you look like your dad. I don't think it's supposed to be any of that. I do think it's just an animation error, which is very bizarre considering there's like no ponytail. There is nowhere a ponytail could even be. It is just Eren's hair, but on top of Carla. It looks extremely cursed. This is also in the Blu-ray. It was never fixed. But I do think it is just an error, and that's basically it. Another flashback we see here is the recruitment scene from episode 14. The only thing to note here is how Erwin uses the word key. He is talking about Eren being the key to saving humanity from despair. Keep that in mind. This extremely somber music plays as we reminisce about everything that led us here. What you'll notice with so many stories is that they'll do flashbacks of this kind to basically take a small victory lap before its big conclusion. Admittedly, even Attack on Titan itself, more on that in Season 4. But here, there is none of that. The path they walked is not one they want to retread. Again, this is not some grand victory. Most of them were just obliterated. The warm memories we see here are all ones of loss and not really nostalgia. And another thing to note with that sort of victory lap is how extremely hard it is to write a mystery like this to begin with. I always use One Piece because it's like the most absurd example, but can you imagine building an entire story around one grand mystery and then having to actually deliver on it? People's expectations do not follow logic. By the time you actually get to something like the basements, headcanons have been built ranging from Grisha being a wall titan to an alien invasion. It literally doesn't matter anymore because the truth is that most people will have already made up their minds. Should you pay attention to them? Of course not. But you also can't really ignore them either. It is just an outcome of very long stories that sort of sell themselves on one big mystery. And the thing with Attack on Titan is that it is doubly true. One Piece, for example, is nowhere near as linear as the Attack on Titan story. The only reason we've had all these detours is because we were quite literally attacked while trying to get back to Shiganshina. But the story we see in Attack on Titan is cyclical. There really is nowhere to have that victory lap because the story ends right where it began. Twice. Both of the super big overarching plots end with the tree, which is episode 1, and the basement, which is episode 1. The shot of Armin atop the wall is like really cool, by the way. The rest of the walk to the basements, in my mind, is like the perfect way to handle this kind of reveal. Yes, it is the thing we've been pursuing ever since episode 1, but every single flashback doesn't show us like how far we've come. It shows us the old life that has now been turned to dust. And even more so, as we see very shortly, the basement is not the end. It's the beginning of something so much worse, so in hindsight, the reveal, not having any kind of fanfare around it, seems even more fitting. And that slow shriek and almost ringing in our ears as they turn the corner is like the perfect encapsulation of that. I just love how long and quiet this entire sequence is. We also catch a brief glimpse of a flower sticking through the cobblestone. Just like with Erwin, I don't think the particular kind of flower is really the point here. I think it's more so just that angle of nature reclaiming the remains of Shiganshina, sort of like we see in the final season EDs. And if you want to tie that together with the flower we saw with Erwin, the remains of Shiganshina really are just one massive grave. But yeah, even outside of Attack on Titan's narrative, I am an absolute sucker for these kind of overgrown urban environments. One thing I would love to see one day is like a archaeological/news reporter retelling of Parody, sort of like the World War Z book. The book, not the movie. Rediscovering the remains of Parody is already kinda sorta implied with the ending, but I think it'd just be really cool. We see a few more fleeting scenes of Hannes, but just like with the rest, they keep walking. They notice Carla, and we then get this beautiful shot of Mikasa and Eren running and running. But again, we snap right back with this Dutch angle. And the cherry on top here is the smash cut to them again running, but this time during that day in Shiganshina. It is no longer just running through the market and goofing around. In an instant, everything changed, and they are now running for their lives. The direction here definitely captures that shock really well, and that goes for like everything, not just Eren and Mikasa. I think all the abrupt cuts and weird angles here are meant to put you in this place of unease. And that only becomes more true as they turn the corner to Eren's house and those horror shrieks or almost moans creep into the scene. But yet again, that is abruptly contrasted by two white doves flying from the moss-covered stone. Those same white flowers dotted around the grass. It's again contrasting the cruelty of the world with beauty. That rock is basically a gravestone for Eren's house, but it is also so beautiful. And one more time, the music makes a complete 180. Those deep, horror shrieks are replaced with a calm and beautiful piano melody, even further accentuated by those pure memories of Eren and Mikasa watching Carla just hang up clothes. something that, as we've seen before, they did together. And we then get this gorgeous zoom-out shot of the tragic but beautiful remains of Shiganshina. Absolute cinema. A neat little scene here is Mikasa and Eren stacking broken plates. Definitely overanalyzing, but I think you could see this as this longing for stability and for a home. Where do you normally use plates? Well, at a table where you eat. But now, those plates are scattered and broken, and so they just try to put them back together. They want to return to that home. Or they could also just be searching for the basement door, I don't know. And we then get one of the most iconic shots in the entire series. Them finally standing at the precipice of learning the truth they've been pursuing since that day in Shiganshina. Another overanalysis detail is Eren not flying the wings of freedom. Almost as if going down here was no longer a goal of the scout Eren, but rather as a member of the Jaeger family. But the best thing here is Eren trying the key, but it doesn't work. And note just how awkward this entire sequence is. It's that subtle pulsing beat in the background as he just keeps finicking with the lock and it just doesn't work. I think it's another great example of conveying those internal feelings externally. Obviously, Eren is anxious on the inside, and so that manifests in this super awkward moment where the key just straight up doesn't work. Except... on one hand, this is the typical subversion of expectations Attack on Titan always does. It was supposed to be this dramatic opening of the door, but the lock doesn't work. Oh no, what? We are doomed! Video game logic dictates that we don't have the right key item, we cannot pass! Except it's like a wooden door, so yeah, Levi just kicks it down. But more importantly, there is that idea of the key itself. In a fictional story, a lot of the time, a key will never be just a thing that opens a door. Erwin talked about Eren being the key to giving humanity hope, Grisha entrusted Eren with the key to restore Eldia, that key actually being the Founding Titan, and so on. The key that Eren carries is simply a visual representation of that weight he is carrying. Just like at the end of the season, it's this metaphorical noose slowly tightening around his neck. This is the thing that weighs him down, the thing that never allows him to truly fly in freedom. And very similarly, Levi knocking the doors is another stroke of genius from a thematic point of view. I think I'll just let my boy Illidan explain.
Sometimes the hand of fate must be forced.
Fundamentally, that is what we see here. For this entire story, this door was the grand mystery. But even when we reach it, we find ourselves at another impasse. As much as I joke about, video game logic, in fictional settings, you simply wouldn't write a situation like this. And so I think having Levi just knock down the door is a very visual representation of that enduring struggle. These grand mysteries, dramatized pursuits of dreams and whatnot, we are done with them. The only thing that remains is just pushing forward. The rest of the story is not about mysteries or triumph, it is just a war. As we enter the pitch-black basement, we get this really cool shot of a flickering torch cutting through. Could be reused animation, could just be because it looks cool, or it could be a very explicit callback to Erwin doing the same thing at the start of the season. That mystery, that darkness we've been stumbling around, is now being lit up. But in terms of just reveals, I love how underwhelming it is. Like, it's just a basement. Obviously no one expected like a wild Pikachu to be chilling down here, but just seeing an empty room is like, so it's just books? I know around this time, people suspected that there'd be like whole stashes of Titan syringes and stuff, but no, it's not even that. It is literally just a study. Hanji even says that all his medicine labels are legit, nothing about this seems off. Keep in mind that we already know that the writing, not spoken language, just writing, is different in Marleyan, but even his text is Eldian. So personally, I think there is a very good chance that Isayama might have actually wanted us to briefly question whether all of this might have been for nothing. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I can absolutely imagine an alternate universe where the basement has no secrets. Just about everyone in the story who has had a dreamed or hoped for anything died a meaningless death. So is that really a stretch? And also note the torn down papers on the back wall. Perhaps those could be like some sort of Eldia restoration plans or something? They're probably not. We also get a cool shot of Eren and Mikasa's shadows being caught in a spider web. Most likely is just cool cinematography with a neat cutaway to show us just how old this basement is. Or it could also be a visual representation of the tangled web that is this entire story. And the shadows could again be that inheritance angle. Though Mikasa then notices a secret keyhole, but again, as they open the shelf, it's empty. At this point, we obviously know that whatever the secret is, Grisha was obsessive with it, which very much tracks considering he was a revolutionary back in Marley. There's this whole deceptive room, aka hiding in plain sight, then there are like multiple locks, then there's a secret lock, and finally, there is a secret department under said secret lock. Another cool potential here is Levi being the one to immediately notice the false bottom may or may not be another nod to his underground days. And also, one thing we actually have to talk about, the whole thing of Grisha using that oil and charcoal as a preservative is insane attention to detail that 99.999% of people would have never even considered. What was Isayama on when he was writing this stuff? Ah yes, I need to hide this secret which will be a book, but this book will only be recovered in multiple decades, therefore I need to write in a preservative, but a preservative that can actually be made in these specific circumstances with this specific technology. No, seriously, what was this man on? I only mentioned the preservative angle, but that is a thing throughout this entire episode. They talk about floods and everything. That aside though, we then get this really cool distance shots of them all gathering around the table, almost evoking this ritualistic sense. But with that, Eren and Mikasa reach for the book, revealing a picture of who we now know to be Grisha, Dina, and Lil Ozeek. And to immediately pay off what Levi said a moment ago about Erwin's hunches not being wrong, we cut to Nile talking about his own conversations with Erwin. Number 1, Wit giving Erwin the big googly anime eyes to show that he is younger is high-key cursed. I don't know why, he looks very funny to me. But number 2, I absolutely love how Erwin's ramblings are portrayed here, because yeah, he might have evidence to suggest that there is sussy business afoot, but he also has zero proof. From his point of view, the specific wording they use is like the smoking gun. No serious historian would ever use such absolute language, not to mention that all of this is tied up with the government itself. But for people like Nile, understandably so, it seems like he is being just extremely pedantic and borderline a conspiracy theorist. I mean, if there was this whole shadow government, wouldn't they also be able to fake this mirage of maybe there being life out there? We of course know that Erwin is indeed correct, but it's just that those conversations are presented in a super realistic sense where both sides, yeah, they make sense. And I love how we fade from that smug, all-knowing Nile to a deeply regretful one. Because what if he had listened earlier? What if all those years ago they trusted Erwin's guts? And Zachary saying that he'll just have to apologize is obviously even more salt in the wound because he couldn't. For the rest of Nile's life, he will have to carry that weight of just ignorance. But to contrast this, Pixis says that dawn is about to break, which, number 1, emphasizes that we've started a brand new chapter in the story, one where the basement and the sea are merely the beginning. But also 2, newfound hope. While the night might have been extremely harsh, the scouts have made it back. They lost many along the way, but the mission that Erwin announced so long ago, during nighttime by the way, was a success. And so, a new day rises upon Paradis. And on that note, Anka, I've got no idea what her name is, rushes in announcing that the scouts have returned, and that Walmaria has been retaken. We get these extremely picturesque scenes of humanity cheering on the heroes of the island, children even flying the flags of the scouts. Only this time, no one shouts back. We do not see their faces because this victory, it took everything. I mean, put the start and end of this mission side by side, and yeah, I don't think this constitutes any cheering whatsoever considering only one enemy shifter actually went down. But as we focus on the books, we drift back to the basement. Hanji looks at the photograph of the previous Jaeger family, saying it's way too detailed to be just a drawing. Don't forget, Paradis does not have cameras. This thing, it is indeed puzzling. This time though, just like with the door, there is no mystery, because as they turn the picture, Grisha has already explained exactly what it is. And once again, I just have to praise the direction, because as the outro music fades in, it just casually says, "I come from the land outside the walls where humans live in luxury. Humanity has not perished. I only hope one of my fellow countrymen will be the first to lay hands on this book." First off, I would pay good money to see a video of my reaction to this, because if you remember what I've been talking about my whole zoo hypothesis theory when I was first watching the series, the moment they said photograph, I almost lost my mind. But number 2, note the wording of countryman or patriot in the dub. This already hints at some political intrigue and motivation behind all of it, because, I mean, why else would you say, like, countryman, instead of like an ally or something else? It does have like a political undertone to all of it. And also remember that the concept of a country doesn't really exist on Parody either. And number 3, as with many things later on, the wording Eren later uses is also identical despite not having any experience of what a countryman even is. And the goofiest thing of all of this is that the first words of the ED is of course also goodbye, which, you know, please don't say goodbye just yet. What do you mean there is someone living on the outside world?
What happens now? What happens now?
But yeah, the direction here of drifting right into that picturesque ED with those nostalgic moments that are captured almost like a photograph, this whole thing is just pure fire. And in terms of Dina and Zeke, you could certainly start spinning up theories, as the whole father angle with Grisha has already been mentioned, and the smiling titan just so happens to be blonde, but we'll leave all of those things for later on. But the episode is not over just yet, because after the ED, we get another scene. And yeah, the whole living in luxury statement is very much questioned, because no more than a few seconds in, we see Grisha stop by, presumably, their mom, and warned about their armbands. Firstly, even a brief glimpse through the door already tells you that this place is essentially industrial as opposed to the super rudimentary technology of Parody. And on top of that, this is Kid Grisha, so they were industrial like a good 30 to 40 years ago. The technology Parody will be facing now is exponentially better. Secondly, Grisha had a sister, one that is nowhere to be seen. Characters appearing in flashbacks but not appearing in present-day stories, yep, chances are they are dead, and spoilers, she is. But thirdly, the armband. With many things in Attack on Titan, a lot of people tend to draw like direct lines between the real-world history and the events we see. But personally, I always thought the story purposely never evoked exact historical moments, and rather focused on like the large-scale ideas behind war as a whole. The entire Marley-Parody dynamic can be applied to, unfortunately, hundreds of different conflicts throughout history because at its core, and this is not a reference, war never changes. The fact that we now have weapons doesn't change the fact that we are still just monkeys fighting for territory and influence. There are some things that Attack on Titan references pretty clearly, we'll get to that in a second, but mostly it is just a conflict that can be applied to, like, just about anything. That said though, while there have been other points in history where armbands are used to mark certain groups of people, I think this one is pretty clearly evoking the Yellow Star armbands. This is YouTube, so I will have to make myself sound like a clown not to get this video suppressed. But Jewish populations were ordered to wear either star insignias or these kinds of armbands. Importantly though, I don't think Isayama actually wanted to draw like a distinct comparison between the two. The way they are portrayed is very different, but in terms of drawing on history, this one is pretty hard to ignore. And finally, there is numero 4, their mom saying, "Don't even think about going past the wall."
I'm sick and tired of all these walls.
So, you know, in like 10 seconds, the luxury outside world is, or at least was, not luxury at all. And just in case you hadn't picked up on the architecture, the clothes, and everything else, we pan up to see a literal airship, so yes, they are way further down the tech tree than Parody. We then see Grisha and Faye running down the street, pretty clearly mirroring the flashback of Eren and Mikasa we just saw. Both duos are trapped by some wall, both duos are marked with some armband or the title of devils, and both are chasing some dream high in the clouds. A whole sea and decades worth of technology might separate them, but the cruelty of the world is all the same. Another cool little detail here is them bumping into a young Tom Xaver here, who obviously doesn't have his Titan yet. And to continue with that Parody Marley mirroring, instead of Eren and Mikasa clearing the checkpoint going inside of the walls, Grisha runs past the guards to the outside world. And in the long run, all the parallels of them looking up and hoping to see the world from the airship, to Eren looking up at the wall of Parody, to eventually Eren flying in the clouds, all of it is yet again that same theme of freedom. Only this time, we will explore it far beyond the walls. But with that, that is episode 56. A short 2 years since starting the series, we actually made it to the basement, and oh boy, what a journey it has been. This episode is yet another masterclass in direction, and that is basically all I have to say. Way too much yapping has already transpired, so I'll just say thank you very much for joining me for the first half of Overanalyzing, and now it is on to the second. So, I hope to see you back as we continue overanalyzing Attack on Titan. And that's the video. Way too much yappers has already transpired, so I'll just say that for the month of September, I'll be streaming a whole lot more. Probably a bad idea, but I'm gonna try it. All of my other channels are linked below, and with that out of the way, I want to say a massive thank you to our current patrons and YouTube members who allow me to produce even more of these for you all. And let's also give a warm welcome to the newest members of the team, AJ, Marin Hossein, I think, and AbeMan1233. Without you, there'd be a whole lot less of my rambling, so seriously, thank you. Other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!